The master setup. Yes. The master. Put the shame in the crew that wants to build the flame. The masters. Dominate the microphone. I speak the truth. The masters.
All right. Little new intro song there. Just a temporarily one off. That is The Masters by DK and Ghetto Socks off their new project. Check it out. It's featuring CL Smooth and Elda Sensei. Everyone knows CL Smooth, Pete Rock, CL Smooth, Elda Sensei, Artifacts.
So we got people writing us songs now.
I know, man. Yeah, that was not
Champagne Bobby's writing one for us right now, right?
That's right. Yeah, custom rap songs.
But yeah,
DK,
welcome back.
Ghetto
What is
Socks,
it?
The Masters.
Season 2 episode.
Oh my God, I
we've
have
been
no
off the mic
idea.
for a little bit here. We've been off for a few weeks.
Yeah. Like we kind of stockpiled a few because I was going away. I was down in Mexico. You were away out in BC, so we had to stockpile a few. And things have, there's no shortage of news coming on.
Everything went crazy as we left.
And you just got back like literally.
2 hours ago, I did the overnight flight Vancouver to Halifax, and then went home, showered, and came straight across. Because we got to record. We need the episode.
Yeah, this is early morning Sunday edition, so the sun is glaring down from beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia. As always, man, can you smash the like button, subscribe, follow, all that stuff, especially helpful to us when you do those things. So we appreciate it. This is going to be the Neal and Andreino was right episode.
Today's episode is going to be a little bit all over the place.
It is.
We're not doing a set topic. I think we have a bunch of things that came up that we want to discuss. Chandler has a lot of them listed out.
Oh, yeah. Listen, we're going to talk about everything from Nova Scotia backtracking on the out-of-province non-resident property tax increase. We're going to talk about Elon Musk buying Twitter because
Also
we haven't
good call.
touched on that. We're going to talk about interest rates continuing to rise, and already we're seeing the results of that here in the real estate market. So stay tuned for all of that. But first and foremost, real quick, Neal, what is going on with you?
Not too much, like you said. BC was great. I just got back this morning. It's an amazing place. It really is. It's a
Never
lot.
been.
I know. You have to go out. I mean, hopefully somebody from BC listens. They have an insane real estate market, like out of this world pricey. But I can see why, because basically it's like Halifax. Honestly, it's a coastal city, but it's obviously grown quite large. And then they have the mountains within like 30 minutes. Like you can be downtown and you can be on like a mountain gondola in 30 minutes, or a giant mountain hike in 30 minutes from right downtown, and you're just surrounded by it. So I think if you're into the mountains and like the outdoor rec, it makes it so cool. But yeah, so no, it was nice. It was an eye opener to like drive an hour outside the city and then be like, oh, there's a for sale sign. Let me flash this up on Realtor.ca and see how much it is. And it was nothing was ever below $1 million. Like just
that's crazy.
No chance, even an hour away from downtown.
I mean, we're getting to the point here where you might drive an hour and still find $1 million property, but it's because you've like driven an hour to a really posh waterfront South Shore community. But everything between can be pretty cheap.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way that they've grown and how big they've grown and how expensive it is. But even that's slowing down here too. I've heard some recent numbers that in some of like the peripheral area, like the Fraser Valley or what have you, that's down 10 to 15% in some of those suburban.
When the rate bounces or goes up on a number that large, the impact is even more insane, right? Like here, we're freaking out. Our average payment's going to go up by $180. Their average payment might go up by $500 or $1,000. You know what I mean? The thing that also blew my mind is just the top end of the spectrum. Like I never understand.
The 1%?
Yeah, this is gonna be like the 1% of the 1%. But there's condos
there, man.
There's condos down there. Like our biggest condos here are what, $3.5 million, I think, is like the biggest, most expensive condo in Halifax.
And that would sit and sit and sit.
It's been sitting for 10 years now. Yeah. And it still hasn't sold.
Is that the Roy?
No, Bishop's Landing. The Roy, I think they did one as well, but I don't think it was as big. The Roy one, they had 2 penthouses. Bishop's Landing had 2 penthouses. They've been on since they built it. Whatever that was, 10 years ago.
That.
They just sold the first one.
Man.
This quarter.
Slide in and get that listing.
Yeah.
It's stale.
It's a little stale. Like it's been like on market for 2,690 days, and you're like, oh Jesus!
I think we need to stage it. Get some new photos. Coming in with the pitch.
Do you know how those ones are? They're blank. There's nothing in them.
Really?
You have to go outfit them and everything. It's like a blank canvas of so many square feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like so, even some of the finishes aren't in. Probably.
I think it's just like white boxed. It's drywall boxed. Very cool. But you got to think, okay, I'm going to buy for $3.5 million and spend another $1.5 million outfitting this thing, if not more.
Jeepers.
But like I looked at, my girlfriend and I were just sitting there on the waterfront of Granville Island. If you've been there, just a little tiny island, kind of outside the city, not outside the city, just on the other side of the water. It's got a bunch of markets and I think stuff like that. Anyways, we're looking at some condo buildings. Like, God, it'd be nice to live here. And then like, all right, like what do some of them look like? So I flip up the building right in front of us on the other side of the water. A regular unit's like probably, let's say 700 square feet. Probably about $1.25 million sort of thing. And like, they're very nicely finished. They're old buildings. Like they're built in the 90s or the 80s. But they're obviously been fully redone. But then, of course, one of them had the penthouse up for sale. And $24 million. And this is not a new building. And was by no means the most expensive listing. But there was just like, that's the penthouse for one of these buildings.
24 mil.
And I'm like, who in the frig is like, that is insanity. $24 million. You could buy any house in Halifax for 24, like any house. The biggest house on the arm. You could buy whole buildings. Like there's people are building 50-unit buildings for $24 million. Yeah. So it's like, holy God. And this is one apartment that somebody's going to live in. Anyways, so that kind of blew my mind. But then the other, like on the flip side of that, literally across from that $24 million condo, they're like marina, and it's a bunch of houseboats that people like full time live in. But they were legit houses. Like,
yeah, man, I knew some people that lived in a houseboat when I was in high school. Shout out to the Stavness Bros. Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
is there a community for that stuff here?
I don't know that I would say it's a community, but they were on kind of the like Purcell's Cove Road side of the arm, and I think they had actually just kind of privately rented someone who had a marina, like let them stay there,
like their dock.
Yeah.
Okay, because like someone told me that there's still some of them floating around here that people live in.
Well, there was someone who actually, man, what community was this? Some person had just like done it of their own accord, and just moored like in the middle of a lake, and residents of the neighborhood were like, "What the hell?" I can't remember where
Is there
that
anything
was.
against that?
Man, I think there's tons of things against that. I don't think you can just like start living in what would be, I guess, Crown land, like Her Majesty's Lake. I don't know. There's got to be rules against that. But
I'm gonna send Mark and the guys photos that I took when I was there. But like, yeah, these were like legit houses. Like when you think of a houseboat, I think of like a shipping container basically. But these were look like normal 2-story homes
that happened to be on the water.
On the water.
Yeah.
And they had like all the little setups. It was funny because they had parking spots for like sailboats and stuff with them. But
oh man, these are yachts. Then basically, is what you're describing.
Well, they were just like, I think they're flat platform barges that they built homes on.
Wow.
And then they would have just like stuff parked beside them, and they would just be docked against the island. And I was like,
I wonder how much something like that costs.
I know. I was trying to find it, but there's only like 20 of them there. So But anyways, yeah, that was cool. I have a couple of things I want to talk about. Maybe I'll wait till later, just regarding rent controls, kind of what their development scene was looking like.
Yeah.
We biked around downtown a little bit, and I just noticed kind of some peculiar things based on the prices of stuff and prices of homes and buildings. And so I just started digging into it, and it's something that I think is going to become applicable here, just because we're in this time frame of like, I feel like we're in the like 70s, 80s era of Vancouver, where they were just starting to have their growth because they had turned on all the immigration taps and everything was going nuts. And so then they were rapid fire throwing in rules and trying different things and seeing what stuck. And so it was like a good case study for us to kind of look at and see what actually works.
Yeah, and I mean, people want to talk about challenges renting. I know a good buddy of mine, when he went to rent out there, he had to pay an application fee just for the property manager to look at his application fee, like a non-refundable fee for them to look at his application, which I think was sort of almost a bribe. And it was not a small amount. We're talking like $1,500 for someone to look at your application to rent a unit that was then probably around like $3,000. And this was 5 years ago or so. And like first month rent upfront, last month rent upfront, and then another massive deposit for
damage
for his dog. He has a 7-pound poodle. So here, you can't charge rent up front. You can't charge more than half a month's security deposit. I don't think you're allowed to charge for application fees. I'm not sure on that, but very different out there.
The half-month security, I think that might be a bit excessive, and I think the app fee is kind of extortion. But like, I think a half-month rent as security deposit is not nearly enough.
No,
when you think that the average rent for one bedroom is $1,600, that means on average you're getting $800.
Yeah,
literally one broken thing that they leave behind, you have now vanquished that $800.
Yeah, yeah. And saying nothing for the fact that if they've done that sort of damage, you're not going to be able to just turn the unit over and rent it. Like, they're not going to move out on the 30th and you can rent it on the 1st. You're going to have a month to do the repair. So now you're actually at a full month rent plus the damages, right? Like,
yeah, or they just bounce on their last month and then now you're in the red by a half month, not including like it's not nearly enough. I think it should at least be one full month. Because I see what our turnover costs on every single unit. Even like you said, just a small amount of like nicks and dirt. By the time we clean the unit, do a light paint touch up, and do all those things, it's always at least $500.
Oh yeah, yeah. And again, oftentimes it's also a month of lost rent.
Yeah.
The challenge is there's just not the person power over the tenancy board to actually resolve disputes. Like, if the security deposits were $1,500, you get a lot more disputes, and then they just don't have enough people there. So, other than traveling to BC, what's new with you?
So on my actual development side of things and like in the rental properties, I've been very on the fence, and I think we're going to dive into this in a little bit. I've been 1 foot in, 1 foot out, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Because I've been saying, I've brought it up 100 times on here. I've been trying all these different pieces of land, and the numbers aren't making a ton of sense. And again, it's not making sense for me as a person trying to get in, where I really need things to be a home run. Because if rates go wonky or the project goes wonky, there needs to be gap and room there to make sure that I don't go upside down. And I think there's a bit of a misconception that these new buildings are just massively profitable, and they're not. Like, it's slim margins on very big numbers. And so I'm not in a position where if I miss the boat on it, I'm okay. And I think a lot of people like discredit, especially in Halifax, a lot of these developers are longtime families that have been doing it, and they're not building these buildings to make a bunch of money right up front. They're using a bunch of money that they have from previous buildings to build these ones that are technically probably going to operate at a loss or like break even for a lot of years before they actually make any sense.
Yeah, and the reason that was doable for a while was because of historically low interest rates. And we're going to talk a lot about that through the course of this episode, because that is changing, and as a result, the market is changing, and what's that going to mean for the economy as a whole, but also housing, because we're still very much in this situation where housing is not affordable for a lot of people, and then there's a shortage of rental properties and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so long story short, now I'm starting to look back at old product again. I have kind of a new wind for old product. It's an unglamorous business. Everybody hates you in it. But as an investment, I think it might make the most sense. So I think I'm going to start turning my eye again back to old product. It's going to be hard. I'm going to have to kind of
Numbers
suck it
going
up.
to be tighter.
That's the thing. Numbers are going to be way tighter. Like, I'll literally be paying double per door, but I don't even think that those numbers are going to come down. With rates going up, I don't see the resale product coming down, because the cost of new is still so large.
And people are going to have the same idea that you just had, which is, you know what, maybe I'm not going to do new. Maybe I need to double back down on the resale stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be people doing that.
But yeah, so I would say outside of that, like, really, for me, I'm in this changing back and forth market shift. I have some stuff I think I've mentioned in the past that I'm working on, just with some management software stuff that I'm trying to build out to help my team that eventually can help other people, as well as some other back-end products that I want to create. So those will be hopefully announced sometime later in this year. But really, I've been spending most of my time on those and a little bit less on my projects, and just focusing on getting what I have now done, so I can get it done, financed properly, and like operational, because we have a lot of empty units. We have a lot of empty units, a lot of buildings on the go. I think we have about 7 or 8 buildings under rental right now. So it's a lot of balls up in the air. Shout out to my property manager, Josh. He's killing it. He's doing everything. But it's just a lot, and it's a lot to carry because there's no income. Like, he gave me my rent spreadsheet for this year, and every month the rent's gone down by a ton. And I'm like, what's going on? But it's because we're emptying all the units out.
Yeah.
So
I'm a similar situation. I closed on an Airbnb. It's a 4-unit Airbnb in the South Shore that long term I'm going to redevelop into a series of townhouses. Nothing too crazy, like not a huge development project, but something that can be manageable and has now gotten a lot more interesting because it can be handled pretty easily.
Yeah.
If you build 5 townhouses, that's much more manageable than building a 6-story concrete building.
Yeah.
So we'll close on that, and that'll be exciting because I've never done the Airbnb model before, and of course it's that time of year where that's starting to ramp up. So I'm going to get that going. Definitely having to rerun numbers on the fly for the build, and I don't know how that's going to look or even what I'm going to do exactly, because the last year, even in the last 6 months, the change in the numbers has been huge.
Yeah.
The numbers in terms of making the project actually float, the cost of construction, but also the required down payment amount. Because in order to keep it viable, as rates go up, you have to put more and more and more money down. So, it went from, all right, there's some hundreds of thousands to come out of pocket because I've got a lot of equity already invested in it. But how much on top of, like, okay, we just need another 400. Okay, we just need another 700. Now it's gonna be like, all right, we just need another $1.5 million. That's not insignificant amount on top of what's already invested in the project. And then it's like, well, why am I having to extend that amount? Well, because the numbers on it are just getting worse and worse.
Labor rates are going up, material costs are exploding,
And the rate.
then the interest rate.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you're multiplying it by $30 million, it gets
Yeah.
to be like an extra $1 million, like easily.
Yeah. So kind of reevaluating that. I've got 9 units under renovation right now, which is, similar to your points. Like, man, that's 9 units that aren't bringing in revenue right now, which, call it conservatively, even at the previous low rents, it was like $6,500 a month. In terms of what they're going to be market rent wise, like, oh, it's 12 grand, 14 grand a month. That's just not coming in right now because we're working through those renovations. So I've kind of refocused on doing that as quickly as possible. But the funny thing is, well, you're right over there. You look.
I just had a moment. I have 45 empty units or something like that, and they've been empty for a bit. I'm like, yeah, that's like $70,000 a month.
It's a very sad moment.
Oh no.
So yeah, I've kind of been like, all right, maybe I need to really expedite those. The reality, though, is the point is to finish those, to refinance the project. By the time it's done, the refinance will be up 2.5% probably on rate. No, maybe not that much, but 2% on rate.
The other underlying thing that hasn't been talked about yet that I'm going to throw out there on top of all of this, as rates climb and they're expected to climb, cap rates follow.
Oh yeah.
So if on this is like it's like a quadruple double down. It's like building cost is up, material cost is up, unit cost to buy is up, and then your interest on your takeout is going to be up. Additionally, when your cap is up, your value is going to be down, so you can take out less.
Yeah.
It's a double whammy, and this is
Yeah.
It's been going the other way for the last 5 years, where everything's been getting better and better. It's like, oh, rents went up, rates went down, caps went down. I can borrow more and more and more. I can keep going, and it causes this big boom. But now it's flipped the switch, and it's going the opposite, and they're converging now, where you have both of them coming together, so it closes even faster.
Well, here's like a really simple example. Like, say the bank on your refinance gets just a little stingier, and they only go 70-30 rather than 75-25. Just say they're feeling a little bit more cautious with everything. So that 5% on a $2 million project is pretty significant in its own right. There's $100,000.
$100,000.
Right? So there's $100,000 you're not getting back to pay back the renovations. But maybe your ability to carry it contracts the value of the whole project, like cap rate or just actually your borrowing ability. So maybe there's another 5% that peels off that. So now that's $200,000 less that you can get on that refinance. And again, people think the margins are huge. They are not. So that's a really easy example of how in 6 months the refinance plan of building could be down $200,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were thin to begin with, and now we're going razor thin. And this is what you see in most of the big cities. It gets to the point, as terrible as it ends up locking out a lot of people, because now it gets to a point where it's almost impossible to get through and grow on your own. You end up having to do a lot of partnerships and things like that. That's why you see in Ontario, the JV partnership is what everyone does.
Also, I mean, this is hyper local to our market here, but people might have seen in All Nova Scotia, which if you're not subscribed to All Nova Scotia, I don't know what you're doing. If you're here locally, you got to subscribe to All Nova Scotia.
Use Chandler's code at TChan to get 10%
or you can
off
just share
the
it
first
like
3
my
months.
Netflix account. We can just all jump on there. But no, you can actually share accounts with people for a really good rate. Anyway, subscribe to All Nova Scotia. But regardless, Killam just kind of came out of nowhere and said, hey, we're putting a lot of our development on the back burner. We're going to go after resale stock. We're going to focus on what we have. They also sort of said, and frankly, we think there's going to be some small people that are screwed and we're going to gobble them up. They didn't say it in those words. But that's kind of what they said.
That is what they said.
They're like, we see all of you guys. What did they call them? They called them...
Mom and pop shops?
no, they said something like, they had a really cute term for basically non-institutional landlords. Non-REIT, non-major player. It said... And they said...
Broke ass foos.
Yeah. So we think some people are going to get in a bind. They're going to get a bind on development sites. They're going to get a bind on half-built projects. What do they call them?
Smaller merchants.
Smaller merchant
Getting
landlords.
squeezed.
Yeah. Merchant landlords, smaller merchant landlords getting squeezed.
It's like Walmart just like coming around to scoop up all the stores.
So you and I balked at some of the prices people were buying properties for, both land and actual resale product.
Yep.
And some of this wouldn't even, interest them regardless. They're that big. But yeah, they're looking around and saying, all right, we've got boatloads of cash and we can fundraise at any point we want.
Yep.
We've just nixed a couple projects because we don't think they're viable and we have limitless money.
Yep.
So what about these other people who are looking at projects and don't have limitless money? Maybe all of a sudden they're going to say, I'm going to get out from underneath this. I'm going to sell it. And Killam's going to be there saying, we'll happily take on what you can no longer
At a
carry.
discount.
So there's that sentiment out there in the market right now, which, again, and there's so much going on right now. But so many of these circumstances we talked about for a long time are out there that can really crush the mid-level mom and pop, small merchant, whatever you want to call them, landlords. And a lot of the public, the renting public says, yeah, screw them anyway, blah, blah. Well, realize all they get replaced with is a bigger, faceless, institutional landlord that will care about you even less. So all of these things are heavily weighted to big, major institutional landlords at the expense of these smaller landlords. We've been saying that from the jump, and here's just another thing coming down the pipeline that is going to further exacerbate that. So much going on, man. So much going
Chandler's
on.
a little stressed.
No,
But
man. So this is why I said this is the Neal Andreino was right episode, because there is a recession coming. We are at the peak of the market. I'm going to officially call it right here, right now. We are at the peak of the market. And when we're at the peak of the housing market, that means we are at the peak of the economy. And why I say that with confidence is because the housing industry is 20% of our economy. So if 20% of your economy peaks out, and then all indications are that it's going to go in some sort of decline, pullback, correction, whatever you want to call it, that in itself is enough to tip the whole economy. But then when you also look at, well, why is that happening and how that's going to relate to other parts of the economy, it is clear to see that we are at the peak of the economy and it is going to be downhill from here.
Yep.
That's a major statement. We're going to unpack it, but you've been calling this for a while.
I've been screaming this for a little while. And it's like I was saying when we were just sitting here when we got in, is I've just been running my Excel spreadsheet. It didn't take anything too crazy. And I just couldn't see how I could be making money out of this. And then when things started kind of going, I was like, something's got to give. And so it was like the telltale signs. Okay, so we had COVID, and then they printed a ton of money. And then once you print a ton of money, you're going to get a ton of inflation. When you get a ton of inflation, interest rates are going to follow. And everything gets impacted by interest rates. It's not just the housing. It's the other thing. It's like you said, housing is 20%, which is enormous. And like that's why I said when we were walking around Vancouver, I was like, man, everybody's got luxury cars. All the stores are super expensive. Everything costs a ton of money. And everyone's in there spending money like insane. And I'm like, all these people are spending money because they feel comfortable because they've made so much money on their real estate. And so it drives everything. And so then we're seeing here now too, it's like everyone's making a ton of money and there's a ton of luxury cars showing up. There's a ton of fancier restaurants and more fancy clothes. And it's because people make money on their assets and they end up spending it on their lifestyle. Yeah. So yeah, when the 20% of housing slows down, everything's going to follow because the spending in all those other industries is going to go down, as well as rates are going to impact all those businesses because all those businesses operate on debt. Yeah, and so all the central banks around the world are kind of attacking asset wealth and saying we've got to bring down asset wealth because, and this is one of the headings I was going to throw at you, which was that in the month of February, Canadians took out $2 billion in HELOCs in the month of February. Yeah, see, like and this is the one that concerns me.
Which is the highest since
debt.
2012. Highest for 1 month since 2012, and it's the shortest month of the year. Right, we could have squeezed in a little bit more in there if it was a full month.
4%.
Yeah, so $2 billion in HELOCs. That means, and this was in February, which is now looking at the numbers, February appears to have been like the real height of the frenzy. Not necessarily the height of the prices because things do lag a little bit, but the height of the frenzy. So people were doing refinances there, and they refinanced their homes via HELOCs to the tune of $2 billion. And this is how asset wealth kind of. The inflationary pressure can come because people's assets go up, so they refinance, they take that money, that's more money that enters the economy, which then they can further spend on other things, be it a yacht, be it something silly, or just out there in the world. And this is how inflation kind of bubbles and expands, driven by asset wealth. And what's everyone's biggest asset wealth? It's their home.
Yeah.
So that's one of the headings that I wanted to throw at you because it shows how people dipped into that equity, refinanced. The other interesting thing about it is a lot of those HELOCs are variable rate. They're tied to the bank rate. So now that variable rate, those HELOCs just got quite expensive relative to what people were expecting. And people are going to go out there and they're going to say, oh, well, you should have seen it coming. Not all investments are secure investments, blah, blah. In 2020, when the pandemic started, I think it was in June, the Bank of Canada came out and said, we are going to keep rates low. In fact, they said they were going to keep rates low until the end of 2023. Which signaled to everyone out there, like, okay, if I'm an investor, if I'm a wannabe homeowner, if I'm looking to expand my business, yes, we're in a pandemic here, but the Bank of Canada just told me that for the next 4 years, effectively, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, I am safe. They're going to keep rates low. And low at the time was 0 to 0.25.
Yeah.
Since then, they just did a bump of 50 basis points, which was the largest increase in 20 years. And in June, they've already hinted that they're going to do another rate increase of another 50 basis points.
Yeah. They're wilding out.
They're really pushing it, right? Like that is quite aggressive. We've already seen the ramifications of that in the housing market. Like, what are you seeing out there? Like, it's slowing down.
I'm just going to put this before I answer that. Conspiracy, Neal. I'm just like, some of this stuff, I swear to God, is manufactured. Like, I'm not even just saying COVID as manufactured, but there's some weird stuff that goes on.
And let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Well, it's funny how it all went down and the way they handled it with the lockdowns, I think. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm against the lockdowns or I'm against vaccines or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just, some of the way the policies are put through and the way they handled it and like how long they drag things on for in certain periods to really have a certain amount of economic impact to force more money into the economy through this. Like, it's like it goes deep. There's like,
well, here let's go a little bit deeper. We kind of already touched on something of during these scenarios, the rich get richer and everyone else gets pulled back down a little bit.
Yeah.
We talked like the institutional landlords versus the small mom and pop merchant landlords is just one example.
Yeah.
A bigger one is, so when they rolled that out at the start of the pandemic, you and I were both like, man, anyone who has money, this is the time.
Yeah.
Right? You can make so much money at this opportunity, and a lot of people really did. And, you close the small shops but allow Amazon to run wild, and all of these things happen. Now you've got a scenario where as like the Fed raises rates in the States, and their situation is worse than us. So we are in a global economy now. And a lot of countries are going to really suffer as their currency drops relative to the American currency. There's also going to be an outflux from a lot of smaller developing countries, developing markets, to the safety and security of the U.S. dollar, which is further going to depreciate some of these currencies in these developing markets who all owe money to the U.S., right? So long term, the actual, U.S. and Canada, we will be able to ride this out. But some of these smaller market countries that borrowed heavily from the U.S. and are now going to have to pay back at higher interest rates with a rapidly declining local currency are going to be further indebted to the U.S. through this process. Bigger picture, though, I mean, oh man, there's so much moving stuff going on here.
If we want to go this, okay, if we're going down this path, I don't know if anyone follows or pays attention to the World Order.
The New World Order, WCW.
Yes, the New World Order. I would like everything lines up right now with what's going on and the fact that this all comes out of China too, like legitimately, I'm not just saying this, like I'm like going crazy. It's very real that over the next 20, 30, 40 years, you can see a new world order taking place through kind of like what's starting now and rolling through. Like China's been having this rapid growth, the States haven't, and now there's places that are shifting off. They're not using the US dollar as their currency of choice anymore, the backing dollar, the one they're going to borrow against. And so as that happens on top of everything else going on and what's happening here with the inflationary pressures and having to raise interest rates, like it was just saying, and everyone owing the money to the States, there's an opportunity here, I think, for things to start to change around. Unfortunately, with world order change is often a lot of war. And so that might also come to place. But that's like my big conspiracy.
With what? China at the head is what you're saying?
China becoming the head. Right now, the States are the head. I
mean, the Chinese economy is not doing great right now either. So, but the thing about China is you never know what they're up to over there, like because they're very secretive.
Nothing's legit.
But they have I was thinking about this the other day. They have a zero COVID policy, effectively.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're shooting for 0 cases.
Yeah.
We've kind of moved on from that. My whole thing is like, damn, what do they know that we don't? Right? Like, why are they getting towards 0 cases?
I said a whole lot of nothing right now. I just said a couple things to throw it out there, and people listening and be like, he just didn't address anything specifically. I'm kind of avoiding it. Maybe we'll do an episode on New World Order and what it means and what could actually take place.
Oh, man.
But I think there's some crazy stuff happening. To bring this all back into like normal levels, to what your question was, is what am I seeing out there? Yeah, I'm with you. Housing market is definitely peaking out. Depending on what it is. If you still have good product, your house is still going to sell for a lot of money. Because to be honest with you, good product homes, a lot of times the buyers are not using much money borrowed to do it.
And there's still demand for that stuff.
And there's still demand, and the cities are still growing, but it's not going to be where it was where people are just willy-nilly buying all over the place like crazy. On the rental stock side, I think we're going to still see strong demand. Development land, I think, is going to still be bonkers because we're going to have a massive pinch there. The people that are in place and the current developers are going to be still in a place to be able to develop and build and make money off of it. And I want to talk about this because now we've kind of been alluding to it. And this is kind of what I saw in Vancouver. And this is what I think is going to happen here. And I've talked about it a few times before based on like running numbers. But condos, I think condos are going to take over the market pretty much across Canada. They already are in a lot of places. Ontario specifically and BC. Like they're very, very prevalent. There's a fair number of them in Alberta now too. The culture there is to own homes, but the average income there is also quite high. So a lot of people are able to own homes. But condos are making sense for the reason that with rent controls over time, the buildings deteriorate. And I noticed this when I'm biking around downtown Vancouver. So that building, a penthouse is $25 million. It's a beautiful building. It's a 40-year-old building, but it still looks great. The lobby's beautiful.
Yeah.
It has all the amenities. But right next to it, there is a 6 or 8-story concrete building that looks dilapidated.
Yeah.
Like the fences are falling
It's a rental.
over.
The other one's
It's got garages on the back.
Yeah.
The windows are mangled. And it just looks gross. And I'm like, what? Like we're right downtown, right next door. The units start at $1 million.
Yeah.
And the building's great and it's 40 years old. And it's because it's a rental and they have rent control since the 70s. So there was just no money to maintain that building. So it's just run on this scroungy style. And the average rent there for a 1-bedroom is $2,200 and it's $3,000 for a 2-bedroom. So they're renting for a ton, but there's still not enough money to actually maintain the buildings. And everyone's gonna say, I know they're just gouging, they're just pulling out landlords agree, they just don't want to put any money into the buildings. But no, there's not a ton of money in these buildings. Like once you factor in everything that has to be done, that's why like everyone freaks out. They're like, I own a condo, I pay $20 million, plus I pay for $10,000 a month in condo fees. Like that's what those condo fees, there's no one making a margin or profit on those. Those are literally just to run the building. Yeah. It's not like there's everyone's like, oh, the condo corp's making a bunch of money. Yeah. You are the condo corp. You own the condo corp just like everyone else in your building does, and you pay per square foot. It's not like a randomly assigned number. It's not like, oh, he's richer because he owns a penthouse, so he gets a bunch more. No, he has 4,000 square feet. He pays a relative amount to you if you have 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, people who own the buildings understand that analogy, and people who don't own the buildings don't understand how much money goes into the upkeep of them.
I'm hoping we can we'll make a shorter clip out of this, and hopefully I'll put this on the pod as well because I have some charts here just showing what took place. But rent control got put in the mid 1970s. That's when they were having their boom and kind of a shortage because they're having a massive immigration push. The chart will show literally apartment starts from there to 20. I think the study was done in 2010. Shrink to just absolutely negative. They did not build apartments at all. It made no sense. And condo construction absolutely exploded, which ended up just pushing prices way, way, way further.
Yeah. The other reason that it's the switch goes from apartment building to condo construction is because on the developer side, and this is what we're facing right now, it's like, all right, it's going to be $350,000 to build that rental unit, and it is worth $350,000 when you're done, best case scenario. So that is a break-even endeavor, and you make no money on it.
But you can sell it for $500K as a condo.
But given the demand, you could sell for $500K. So your bank's going to like financing it a lot more. It's going to make a lot more sense viability-wise for you to do the project. So that's why things switch over to condos.
And if an investor buys their $500K, instead of renting it for $1,800, they have to rent for $3,000 a month.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing, like, we've talked about this a bit, and like, I don't want to just bitch basically about how this is not going to be possible and these rules make no sense. Rent control is a bad rule. It's like every single economist agrees. Rent control does nothing for anyone. It just makes it harder to actually build rental stock.
Yeah.
But they also were talking about how in BC, like, they had done tax benefits, so like deferred taxes on the buildings and other little projects like that the government offered to do with it. And right now we're getting this CMHC and we're talking about how great it is and it's going to help with construction booms. But
now the rates are up and it's going to be a moot point.
Well, but my thing was, and this is what I said, and this is why I was so horny to buy land today, because I'm like, the second this happens, all that happens is the land values go up. So to reference a little better, because people are saying that and this, but CMHC now said they're potentially, or they're going to offer 95% construction loans.
Yeah, and 50-year AMs.
This is amazing. It's going to make things so much easier. You think, okay, a $10 million building, I only need to do $500K down, and I can put the 9.5 with CMHC. It's a 50-year AM, like good rates, on and on and on. Sounds amazing, right? If you own the land, yeah. But all this meant is all the current land that's out there
skyrocketed.
Just skyrocketed in value.
Yeah.
So these incentives that they're creating don't actually make it any easier for someone to get into development. Doesn't make it any easier to build if you're getting into it now. Mm-hmm. It only aids you if you already own the land and you're going to do it. So it only aids the people that are already in place. It's the same stuff. Like they're not doing it in a proper way. This study was actually kind of interesting. Y'all sent it to you to read, but they said the three things that they came up with to improve off of it was it was done by Rental BC. That's like their rental agency thing over there. I guess it's almost like a union. Or what would that be called? It's like basically their group. Like we have one here in Halifax.
Okay. Yeah, we have I-bonds that sort of similar to that.
Yeah, similar to that. So they represent the landlords. Anyways, their three things they came up with was to remove rent control if it's going to be maintained as a rental. Provide zoning incentives for rentals over condos. So if you buy a piece of land, you can put up 30 units as a condo, but you can put up 60 as an apartment, and you can do less parking and less amenity spaces and things like that, because a lot of times they don't get used in rentals. And then number three, which is one we've always talked about, is removing sales tax, HST, GST off of rental housing. Because that's just purely boiling down to the consumer. That tax, everyone's...
Oh, it gets passed along.
Here, that's 15% of your building cost.
So here's why I'm trying to think of what to tackle first. Let's just take a little digression because I took some heat, or there was a lot of heat around the removal of this non-resident out-of-province property tax increase for people who own effectively second properties here in Nova Scotia. So these are for individuals who live in another province, but they have a property they own in Nova Scotia that they're not renting to a Nova Scotian. So that means they come there seasonally or they Airbnb it or something to that effect. And the provincial government was going to levy a 2% property tax on that across the board, which would in some jurisdictions increase property tax by about 180%. It sounded good to people out there who didn't understand the legislation because it sounded like, yeah, this is a tax on people from Ontario or BC coming here and driving up our property prices.
Yeah, they come here with endless boats of money.
Yeah, that was the thought. But if you read the legislation, it clearly said that if those people are actually moving here, they're exempt from this tax.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to have any implications on this supposed scary other who was coming here from these markets to buy up our housing here in Halifax and drive the cost to the roof. Wasn't going to address that. But a lot of people naively or ignorantly thought that was what it was doing. What it was actually targeting were people who, have a cottage in a rural area, or maybe they just spend their summers in a, $1 million place down in Chester, which is a very tiny percentage of people that have almost no bearing whatsoever on housing prices, let alone the housing crisis here in Halifax area, because this doesn't really apply to people in Halifax.
Yeah.
What it was going to do is strongly discourage those people from continuing to come to Nova Scotia. And again, they're going to the Valley, they're going to the South Shore, they're going to Cape Breton, they're going to these areas that rely heavily on what is the tourist industry. And while these people are not technically tourists because they own property there, they are effectively tourists. They come there, all they do is spend money in the local economy. They don't, burden the healthcare system. They don't burden the school system. They don't burden.
They're direct
much of
cash injections for
They're
us.
direct cash injections, who, by the way, already pay property tax.
Yeah.
Right? So all it was going to do is discourage those people from coming there anymore. And there's this perception now, the government said, oh yeah, maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense. So the government decided not to go forward with that property tax increase. And of course, everyone online is whining and saying, oh, this is just the government catering to a bunch of rich people and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, the lobbying against this tax increase was predominantly driven by local residents of those towns
People
who said,
own all the little businesses.
Yes.
People who survive off of that.
They're like, no, we want those people to continue to come here. What are you doing? All it was going to do, it was going to take millions of dollars out of those local economies and then redirect a smaller amount in the form of property tax to the government. And this blows my mind that people could think that was a better solution and that somehow that would impact housing in Halifax. The disconnect there, like not to cut you off, but it blows my mind how angry people can be online while simultaneously having no idea what they're talking about.
It's just a headline. Like we said, it was a political gain move, and it's a headline that they designed to get people like, oh, they got it because it's all these foreign people buying it. We've talked about it. Only 1% to 2% of houses were ever purchased from people outside of the city, and those are people moving here. Like, why would we punish other Canadians to move to another Canadian city? Even why would we punish people moving from out of country? But like, really within our country, I don't get it. But I just like to everything you're saying, they're like, and it's going to give us whatever it was, $68 million in tax revenue is what we've estimated. I'm like, but you're going to lose, like you're saying, from all the money that they spend here and all the money that they invest otherwise, and all people that are just not going to come anymore. You're going to lose all of that money. Yeah. Like, it made no sense at all. I think they kind of did it too because you see Ontario and BC having them. Their percentages of people moving there are way, way, way higher, and they have a little bit different market again, where there's a lot of speculative buyers that are just flipping stuff to do it.
Oh yeah, they flat out have this issue where people with no connection to the province whatsoever and no intent to visit there buy property to hoard money and just sit it vacant. Yeah, that's not what we have here. Yeah, right, and it's really frustrating because when people get so angry about something they don't understand, it's like, oh, you've got all this misdirected rage that you could be channeling towards something actually good. Like, I believe that we have a lot of work to do on our housing here, but that was not the angle to take because it was going to have no connection to the major markets that are getting very expensive. It was going to have no relation whatsoever to creation of more housing stock. It just wasn't.
But take the tax revenue and put it towards tourism Nova Scotia to try and re-encourage people to come back.
Oh my God, yeah. The other funny thing is,
I'll give them credit though for going back on it and removing it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what? Huge
mistake,
credit to that.
You walk it back.
Exactly.
The message was unfortunately sent to the rest of the country that, we kind of don't want you here. Like, it was an unfortunate message, but they did walk it back. They did, common sense, rationality did prevail. So that's great. And, tip your hat to anyone who realizes they've made a mistake and walks it back. Yeah. My thing too is we've been paying taxes, for years in order to address housing, and they've done nothing. I know. And now they're saying all we need is a little more tax money and then we'll fix it. Why do we believe them? Like, I don't like, people are so the easiest way to get a tax passed is tell people it's on their enemy, right? Like, so this is what they do when they pass a tax. They say, these people over here are your enemy. Yeah. Because they're like come from a ways. And even worse than that,
they got money.
They're rich.
Yeah.
Right? And people who otherwise like don't want taxes are like, yeah, tax those mothers. Yeah. Right? So all of a sudden, everyone is, blindly goes along with a government tax. And all this was going to do was put more money to the government and less money to local businesses. And how people could look at that and be so ardently in favor of it online, really, it depresses me because it shows like how uninformed the voting public is and how a lack of understanding of economics and fiscal policy and the real estate market. And it makes me feel like we're doomed because people are going to go based on headlines and not realize the implications. So that leads me to my next point. And we are really just all over the map here today. Thanks for following along. Those of you who are struggling to do
thinking, but yeah.
So the big thing right now is everyone like, yeah, reset. Right? People are like, yeah, that's right. I want this housing market to crash. I want to be really clear. Let's revisit the fact that the housing industry is 20% of our national economy, effectively. 20% of GDP. It's 20% of our economy. Just hoping that collapses is a very dangerous thing to wish upon people because that will trickle through. The reverberations
doesn't matter
of that
what business
will
you're
be devastating.
in, you are going to feel it.
It'll be devastating. But then let's also look at the fact that, as we all know, it's like, yeah, you own your house, but the bank also kind of owns your house. Mm-hmm. So you've got the 5 major banks or whatever it is cross country. The bulk of their value and their assets are that's the real estate. So they're going to be aggressively protective of their bottom line. And if that starts to suffer, they're just going to contract credit.
Yeah.
Right. So anyone's ability to borrow, to expand their business, to go out there and spend in the economy, that is going to be really, really hurt as well.
Yep.
So if you're out there screaming for this reset because you think it's going to make your life better, maybe bring your rent down, maybe get you a home, no, like you're going to be unemployed. Right? Like if we go through this crash, and this is why we're at the peak, because this is another heading I was going to throw at you. Nova Scotia's unemployment rate is at 6%, which is a new all-time low. And this reflects that we are at the peak.
Okay, if we're going to talk hyper-local, I think it's different for Halifax. And I think we are at the peak in a lot of ways, but I also think Halifax is different. And this is my other thing of like, we're in the business of taking on people. That's how Canada's always survived and pushed through everything. And so we are, and I'm with you 100%. Again, people are basically being a little bit naive to the fact that, yeah, if housing market goes down, it's going to impact everything. It doesn't matter what business you're involved in some way or format, it feeds that. Or like you're saying, the credit for those different things are going to pull back. And when rates go up, it's for all the businesses.
Exactly.
Too.
This is the other thing. Yeah, it's not just the mortgage rates that are increasing. It's your employer who just took out a bunch of debt over the last 3 years.
Business debt, consumer debt.
They're going to lay you off.
Yeah. They're
right?
they have to cut costs somewhere. And everything is going to cost more, and there's going to be less people to spend money. Like it's a compounding problem. But what was I going to say? Sorry, with Nova Scotia hyper-locally, where there's so much immigration, I think it's going to power through a lot of things in the sense of like there's still going to be a demand for housing and rental stock due to the fact that there's just so many people. So even though it costs more to do it, basically what's going to happen is the consumer's just going to spend that much more. That's all it's really going to boil out to be, is the consumer's going to spend that much more to do it. And then there's just going to be so much more demand. Like we're having a lot of companies that are moving here, and there's a lot of government incentives for companies to come here, like tax benefits and things like that, that are going to keep to driving that move and that suck up of people. And as these new areas, like, okay, now Enfield's blowing up, they're going to have all the new stores and everything out there, and they're going to have a whole new district of commercial that they need to fill with people to work to service that area. And so I think that's going to keep going on here hyper locally, just simply on the immigration fact. But again, it's kind of a double-edged sword because eventually the amount of people coming here will outweigh the number of jobs being created, and we'll start seeing that unemployment number creep back up.
Yeah, I'm not saying like this is going to be a peak followed by a collapse. This is that peak that we were calling for a while, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to crescent out and we're going to level off. I think that is happening. It's going to continue to happen. Also, the projects that are already started, those are going to come through and go to fruition.
Kill them to buy them and finish them.
Yeah, like the contracts that were signed and the employees that were brought in during a robust period of time where you couldn't find anyone and everyone was getting headhunted, those are still going to go great for a period of time.
Yep.
There is a lag.
Yep.
There's a lag even the way the data is reported. Like we're still getting numbers coming in like prices all-time high, unemployment all-time low. But these things lag. And we're about to have another 50 basis points increase, which means all the employers, all the corporate borrowers are going to feel the pinch. It's going to take 6 months, 12 months to happen. but it's going to be a significant issue. Like there's no other way to call it. Like we're going to create a recession. And this is kind of the goal, right? The goal is to, really slow things down, but they are being quite heavy-handed with it. And if you go back, we've been doing this now for a year and a half. How many times did we say they probably should raise interest rates, but they can't do it because everyone just took on bad debt and we're still in the pandemic. And it's like, they didn't raise interest rates again. They probably should because there's all this inflation. And now after the fact, they're hitting it with a sledgehammer as opposed to like slowly tweaking the dials all the way through.
There's the other like kind of elephant in the room that just adds onto this. It's just like more fuel for the fire that we haven't discussed. It's causing a bunch more shit. And it's one that isn't like something that cannot be solved and won't end up correcting itself over time, even though it sounds like it's impossible to. And that's the logistical issues that we're facing that is creating artificial inflation. And
Explain.
That is, well, because there's a shortage of stuff, the prices are shot up. The prices of cars are up 30%. It's not because the cost of the car costs 30% more. It's simply because it's all the shipping is behind on everything and all the products are like being poorly shipped. And so now it takes 2 months to get a car. So the one that's sitting on the lot, instead of it selling for $29,900, it's selling for $35,000. And so you're paying an artificial markup, not because the car actually costs any more or costs any more to build. It already has that inflation in that $29,900 price. It used to be $28,900 last year. It's $29,900. That company's already put in their inflation. You're now paying an extra $5,000 for nothing. Like that money's going to nothing of any actual value. That's simply because there's logistical issues in that market. And that's not going to, everyone's like, there's no way it's going to correct itself because like our logistics are too insane. What's going to allow it to correct itself is when consumer demand shits the bed. When it stops and they don't need to be shipping stuff and there's 100 ships sitting idle, then the systems will get back into place and it'll all end up getting corrected, I believe. But that's the one that really concerns me is it's all artificial price.
Yeah, what
increasing.
you're saying is that the real issue this whole time has been a supply issue, not a demand issue, and I totally agree. It's not all of a sudden people woke up and they were like, oh, like we just demand more housing. Mm-hmm. There's more than there was an element of increased demand. Like immigration came here, so there's more people. Yeah. But there were also areas that they didn't have a net increase in people, and still the housing market increased. So the question is why? If there's no actual shift in demand, why is price increase? It's because there was a shortage of supply. So we're doing all these really heavy-handed things to shoot aggregate demand, right? However,
it's not the issue.
The issue is more on the supply side.
Yeah.
So now you're going to stifle an economy and realize that's going to hurt housing starts. It's going to hurt rental stock. And it's going to further collapse supply because you were talking about how CMHC rolled out all these great programs to really encourage housing stock because the only way to fix this is supply, supply, supply. Unfortunately, the right hand did not talk to the left hand being the Bank of Canada, who's like, yeah, unfortunately, now we have to jack rates to the roof. So all those programs that you rolled out, even as great as they are, now still don't carry water at these new interest rates. So all of those rental stock starts are going to stop. So, again, if you think that this correction and this hammering of the market is going to be beneficial to, the first-time consumer or the rental consumer, it's not.
It's really not going to benefit anyone. It'll benefit some people, I think, in a small short term, and they might not even realize the impact that it has on them in the long term. But it'll impact some people, like when you have like a very stable job, you're a working couple, you have very stable jobs. Realistically, your job's not going to go away. Let's say you both work for the government. Your job's not going to go away during a recession. Then the single family home you're going to buy there might be an opportunity where you don't have to go in a bidding war, or you might be able to beat the price up a little bit and feel like you got a deal, even though technically I guarantee you'll still be paying more than you would have paid 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But it'll be a slight deal compared to maybe what someone just paid 6 or 8 weeks ago.
Yep.
And so you'll get that and you'll be able to kind of go through that process, and then eventually maybe it'll start to go back up in price. And so you'll feel like you're getting a deal and this was totally worth it and it all made sense. But the other thing is, everything you do, like you're saying, is going to be impacted by it. And so any other opportunities you might have in your life, other investments, if you have anything in stocks or any sort of mutual funds, or even the pension plans that you're going to end up receiving money from, all of those are going to take a negative impact. So in the short, immediate feel in that moment, you're going to think you're winning. But realistically, this impacts all of us negatively.
Yeah, and you may be like, yeah, I got it for $15,000 less than the person 6 weeks ago, but you're paying an interest rate that's 1.5 points higher.
Yeah, and over the next 25 years, you'll pay an extra $100,000 bucks.
They're going to make out better than you, right?
Yeah.
So it's complicated times. I do feel that we're in a really good position here hyper locally. I don't feel that there's going to be a major like 20%, 30% pullback in housing, not at all. Like we sort of said from the jump, I think this year had another 5 or 10% in us, and then maybe a little pullback leveling off. And I think we've hit that 5 or 10% here in the first few months, and I think we are going to level off. I think, and like we said from the jump, the core stuff is still going to have high value because there is still a shortage of supply. But the stuff out there, periphery, that's like standard product that can be replaced easily, some people did overpay for that stuff. That's going to be, they're going to be in a bit of a tighter scenario, but at least they've got a great rate locked in.
He just unpack it a little more. I think you agree on this. One of the big reasons that I don't think that our housing stock can pull back a insane amount is it cannot be replaced for any less than it's going for. Yeah, we're like, holy crap, these bungalows in wherever are going for 400 grand now, 500 grand, which is like out of this world, but they are 2,000 square feet
you can't build them. Yeah.
Sitting on a 7,000 square foot lot. You can't build those houses for that price. And yes, it's a new house versus a resale, so technically it's probably worth a little bit more, but it's the idea that it's not like these massively inflated land values. I feel like we have just now paced kind of where things are with construction costs and inflation. Before, we were way below. Like everyone was like, oh, like I bought my house for 200, but it's insured for 450. And you're like, well, that's what it costs to rebuild this thing. I even find out the rental stock, like fully renovated rental stock, they're like, this is what it needs to be insured for. You couldn't rebuild what we're offering for anywhere close to what it actually ended up costing. But so I think that's what helps to protect us here. Whereas again, in places like BC and in Ontario, I'm concerned because I'm like, a lot in a regular neighborhood is $1 million. So that is inflated because you're just saying this piece of dirt, this 5,000 square feet is $1 million. Here, your lots are still 100, 150 grand, which is a bit of inflation of a value, but it's not so insane. And that's not ever going to, I think, just if it gets any lower than that, there's always somebody with that amount of money to just buy those pieces of land. And so it's like a very low barrier that'll keep things going. Whereas I don't think that you have, even though the average home is $2.5 million in both of those provinces, I don't think the average person could cough up $1 million cash to buy those pieces of land. And again, where we're bouncing all over the map. Another thing I meant to point out earlier when you were talking about this is with rates going up and how this is going to impact everyone. Again, in BC and Ontario, most of those approvals are not income based; they're net worth based. And they're saying, okay, so you have a net worth that's big enough to buy this house, even though you don't really have the income to support this mortgage payment. Well, they're 90% of their net worth is their house. So when that goes down, like it doesn't make any sense. And a lot of people are using these HELOCs, like you're saying, to make their mortgage payments. Yeah. So, it's
There's a host of cards there. The other thing that people need to realize though is, if there starts to be a decline in home values, that doesn't mean the seller is going to voluntarily just sell you the home for less than they want. You know, it's going to
be not be able to.
They may not be able to, but people are also just going to like not sell their home, right? So we will get a further contraction of supply, which will help, keep the.
There'll be a very short-term blip, and then everyone's going to realize that there's still a massive supply issue, and it's not going to change anything.
Yeah. So I don't really think this heavy-handed approach is going to actually create any more buying opportunities for first-time home buyers or people trying to like get ahead, because they feel like they're swimming against the stream. Like I'm sorry to say it, this isn't going to alleviate that pressure. One, they're going to be paying a higher interest rate. Two, I don't think it's going to pull property prices back, certainly not enough to offset that higher interest rate. And the economy is going to be bad that those same people who are like, I'm going to time this purchase because those sellers are going to be squeezed. It's like, well, newsflash. If they're squeezed, chances are you might also be squeezed. Like what's going on in this seller's life that they've lost their job and have to sell this home? And are you immune to that? Right. So it's going to be a rough little bit. My hope is that because I think the Bank of Canada is underestimating the implications of what they're doing. And unfortunately, the lag time is about 6 months. So I think there's going to be this other massive increase in June. And then by fourth quarter, they're going to be like, oh, crap, like we're in full recession mode. And if we want to go a little bit further down the road, the Republicans are going to win the next election in the U.S. They are, right? Because by the time all this comes to fruition, their economy is going to be in the tanker.
Yeah.
We're going to be in the tanker.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty strong chance the Conservatives will win the next federal election here in Canada.
Yeah.
So these things have big, sweeping ripples through everything. We got to wrap up. This is like the most craziest episode ever.
How far into we?
We're like an hour and somewhat into this thing, aren't we?
No, I think we're.
How far are we into this thing? We're an hour and 2 minutes in.
We're an hour and 2 minutes in.
We're just ranting
Holy
here.
Jesus. Okay, well, pause. If anyone's still listening out there, we're going to have to do another episode, but we're all doom and gloom. I'm usually just the doom and gloom guy, I'd like to say. Usually it's just me coming in here freaking out. Chandler is now doom and gloom. I've converted him and I love it.
Well, listen, we've been terrified of inflation since day one, and there were some times where I would leave the episode like, man, we're so dumb. Like, we're talking about inflation. No one cares about inflation. Like, no one can see inflation, the ramifications. And we talk about, like, yeah, rates should probably be up. Well, shit.
We're trying to be ahead of the curve.
Here it is. And, I even look back at it now and say, well, I'm a dummy because I knew this was coming. And there were some investments and purchases I made in October that I now view very differently, right? But when there's no interest rate and money's flowing and it's cheap and it's easy, you get a little loose. And
you also, when you get used to it, it's like, I killed that project, everything's going. You get this false sense of security and you keep doing it. But I want to, maybe on the next episode, I'm going
to fire some things at you real quick.
Patreon, last thing, I just want to talk about, I'm just going to say, we're going to start doing some stuff about what we think is actually a smart move to make right now.
Yeah.
On some investments where you should be putting your money in, stuff like that. Anyways, hit me with this. Let's go.
All right. Just like one sentence response. How do you feel about the following news headlines? Elon buys Twitter.
I think that's actually hilarious. And I think it's kind of good because I think he'll keep it a free speech area. So I'm all for it.
My curious thing about that is everyone who is maybe really concerned about that, let's say people on the left who are concerned about him buying it, and the only thing he said, because he hasn't really gotten the keys to the king, like he hasn't done anything yet. All he said is, I want it to be more free speech based, and people are already losing their minds. And then you have to ask yourself, like, if you are in favor of less free speech, like, how do you justify that?
I think he'll do a better job than Trump's app, because I think Trump's app will become more of a bigot space. And I think that'll be the one thing that he'll try and keep in check.
Man, no one's going to be out there. Like, I'm not promoting hate speech by any stretch. However,
hate, subscribe.
The best way to move forward in a positive way is just to have discourse and interaction, and sometimes that means spirited debate, where someone with a really stupid idea posts it online and everyone corrects them. And if you believe in this like utopian democratic discourse based society, you have to allow people, even with stupid ideas, to say those ideas, so then you can educate them, right? Like this is, so you're either pro free speech or not. Crypto getting smashed. Any hot take on that?
I feel like I saw this coming. Like I said, when interest rates are going up and inflation's going up, people need money. They're going to take it out of the easiest place that they have and what they value the least. And most people don't have a ton of faith and confidence in their crypto, so they pull it from there.
Yeah. A metaverse or a man bought an NFT for $2.9 million, then listed it for sale at $48 million, but the top bid was less than $280.
I think that top bid was too high. No, I think NFTs, and I think we talked about it a bit before. I thought NFTs, the technology is smart. I think it's going to play have a ton of value in the metaverse and have a ton of value even in the real world. But I don't think selling pictures online is what NFTs are for and how they're going to make money. I think that's a big bubble. Well, I guess it already popped, but I think we talked about that. View our old NFT episode.
A fictosexual man is struggling with intimacy with his wife because due to a software update, she can no longer talk. So this was someone who dated a fictitious online avatar for, I think, 8 years. They eventually got married, but the software changed and he can no longer talk to her, and he's struggling with intimacy as a result.
I feel for him. That would suck. That would suck so bad. And I don't, you know what? Everyone's got their thing, and I know there's a ton of issues out there, so I feel for him actually in some levels on that sense. But otherwise, man, you got to get that software update fixed. Go with like a nice like Australian. You could put in like a Margot Robbie voice or something.
There you go. Similar vein, there's a metaverse company planning to offer immortality through a live forever mode, where they're essentially going to create an avatar of you for your family members to interact with you after your death.
Yeah, I see all this stuff coming to play. I'm not at all surprised. I actually think it's a great idea, great business idea. I foresee a ton of people wanting to get on that. I could see myself doing that, being a self-centered freak. I would go ahead and I'd get it to follow me around and take all my data and create something out of me, and that'll live on forever. I know not everyone, but a lot of people want to live on forever. They really do.
The Halifax modular units that were created, kind of emergency housing for misplaced or unhoused individuals, are ready. Unfortunately, though, they haven't been able to meet the staffing requirements yet for them.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think it was good what they tried to do. I think it was executed poorly, and it just shows the inefficiencies of what takes place in our government offices and how much the cost can get overblown. I understand that those numbers we talk about aren't purely for housing units. A lot of that stuff is medical spaces and other things in there, but still the numbers were out of this world. Regarding the staffing shortages, that's a problem we're facing everywhere in all these cities, and this is where immigration comes into play. There's lots of smart people that they bring over, very educated, that can fill these positions, and I find they work a lot better in these service industries than some of our local community.
I think also credit should be given to council because they did something. And that you can not please people all the time. People still want to hate on them.
On what they said.
Man, they delivered on these. Did it take longer? Absolutely. Was it way over cost? Absolutely. But there are now, more housing units than existed a week ago, and certainly way more than existed 6 months ago. And they're going to be good. They're going to be safe. They're going to be warm. They're going to have running water. They're going to have electricity, and they're going to have a staff there around them. So this is a good thing.
I'll add one more line to that. They've done this. I agree with you 100%. They now I hope they're forward thinking and planning the next ones and starting them now, not once another headline and people are freaking out about it, then they just knee-jerk reaction. How about you start it now? It can be a lot lower cost. It can be done a lot better. It can be bigger, on and on and on. But that's my only
say it
thoughts on
loud.
that.
We do not need affordable housing. We need public housing. Switzerland. In Switzerland, they're building a 30-story wood building.
That excites me. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about wood. I don't totally get it. I've seen a lot of research on it, but wood frame buildings would be super cool. I think they'd be neat. They'd look good. I have some concerns regarding maintenance, but I guess if it's sealed, it should be fine.
Leave it to Switzerland to figure stuff out, man. They're great over there. Last one. A woman who in the past has had issues with landlords forcing her to get rid of her pets has decided to marry her cat in order to have a better case in the future to not have to get rid of her feline friend in future rental situations.
We allow pets, but if I didn't allow pets and I saw that, I think I'd still reject her, probably for even more reasons than before.
Wow, Neal's not a romantic. All right.
What do you mean? I was going to marry the computer earlier.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Listen, we're going to have a lot to talk about because the tide is turning a little bit. I think we're still big believers in purchasing. We still believe it's a strong market here, but our economy is going to face some challenges, and it's going to be an interesting 24 months.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, double down on everything you said. Thanks for listening. But I want to say that both Chandler and I are making a bigger effort on this, and we want to get some feedback to know what would make it better. So if you actually listen to this point on, please message us or shoot us a text and just say, hey, this is what I think you guys can improve. Like, I know we both want to make this as best as it can be, and we don't want to lose it and turn into like we're starting to run out of headlines or we're starting to lose some excitement. We want you guys to say, okay, it'd be better when you talk about this or are more interested in these things. And we're trying to figure it out from our analytics, but it would really help if it came straight from your guys' mouth. So please, please, please reach out. It means a ton. But again, thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Check us out anywhere.
If you know someone who might be curious to hear some of what we talked about here, I think these are important issues right now. They're very timely. Lots going on. Share this with someone and say, hey, you might want to listen to this here. We really appreciate it. So
the economy is dead, but spring has sprung.
Let's go. Let's go. All right. Bye. Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.